stuff, so I figured it was probably best to just introduce myself. My name is Britta Fluevog. I am listed as an artist, which I am. I do sculpture, I do textile stuff with beading, and I do ceramics as well, but I also do a fair bit of activist work in Vancouver. I am a member of the Downtown Eastside Neighborhood Council that does do a lot of activist work in the Downtown Eastside. I'm also a member of Streams of Justice, which is also an activist group. It's a Christian one, and I also lived at Occupy Vancouver. So that's where my political standing comes from. I'm looking at the tar sands today, but I'm not doing a lot of facts and figures. I'm not a scientist. It's not my forte. You guys can look up any fact that you want. Probably you'll come up with more interesting stuff, and for all the scientists in the room, you probably understand what it means better than me. But I'm going to give you my personal sort of take on it, and then hopefully we can have a fair bit of discussion after. So when you look at the tar sands, you have gains, you have, it changed. I had nice little arrows, but, so you have gains of revenue, profit, and jobs. You have higher emissions and global warming. You have higher rates of cancer and higher economic disparity. Obviously, some of these being higher is good, and some of them are not as good. Oh, well, those ones are arrows. So you have less clean water. You have less. You have lowered environmental health as well in the nature and wildlife. You have less agricultural lands, and you have decline in positive local community. That's within the immediate communities. You look at the places, you get lots of drugs, you get way too many males and not enough females working up the tar sands, which leads to all kinds of problems, and you have decline in the native communities. That's the wrong button. I'm going to call the tar sands capitalism or capitalist-based environment. So when you look at the green initiative, it's sort of similar thing. What it is usually, other than a few things, what they are is basically just short-term. You're trying to make stuff look good. You have green gas. Is it any better? Not really. It's basically using the exact same principles we've always used, and just making them look slightly better or making them slightly better practices. There's really very little change when you look at the green initiative. It's basically using the exact same methods we've always used, just altering them slightly to look better. And what it is short-term planning, and it's not evaluating the complete costs. And what I look at that is long-term capitalism and counting the costs, and that's where we need to move. And I'll explain this better by looking at the tar sands. So obviously, when you have the tar sands, you have increase in revenue and profit. There's a lot of money to be made. And I have my example here, and I'll explain it later. We have our golden box, lots of money, it looks really nice. You also have an increase in CO2 emissions and global warming. So the profits and stuff are only for a short period of time. So we have this very nice, big increase to the economy, but it does not last. If we put the economy on top of it, this will sit here nicely for, this is just an example, obviously. It'll sit here nicely for a day. It might sit here nicely for 2 days. It might sit nicely for a week, but eventually, the weight of the cell phone is just going to flatten the tar sands. The economy can't sit on top of the tar sands forever. It is a finite resource. It's only a finite source of revenue. And we're going to move on. So you have an increase in CO2 emissions and global warming, which is an ironic thing because what it's actually doing is when you are increasing the emissions, we are increasing global warming, and you're actually making the land where the tar sands are become more valuable. Because to this point, you have all this land up north that really the climate is not very good. There's not much there. But if you look at global warming, you actually have a good section of the north in Canada that actually becomes usable land. And what the tar sands is doing is polluting that land. I have economic disparity in blue. I personally see it as a problem. I do think that it leads to other problems, but it is neither necessarily good nor bad. Obviously, just the general, so I have the increase in emissions in both sections because it does have a positive effect in making the land more valuable, but on the whole there's huge negative effects in global warming, and it causes extreme weather. You guys will all notice summer started about 3 days ago in Vancouver. Until then, I don't know, it was April and June. And erratic weather is not good for growing stuff. It's not particularly pleasant. And I think if it continues that way, we're up for some real problems. Then another increase we have is in cancer. We have our fish here. These are found in Lake Athabasca, which is right next to the tar sands. These are cancerous fish. You'll notice the enormous head on one of them and the huge growth on the other. If you're finding this in the fish, you can only imagine what we're going to start finding in the humans. And in Canada, we have healthcare, so that will end up being a dollar amount, and that is going to end up being a very large dollar amount. I don't know, you'd have to have economists and healthcare people actually being able to figure out the numbers. I can't, and I don't even know if they can, because I don't know if it's possible to predict cancer from something like the tar sands, which no one else has. It's maybe possible, I'm not sure, but I know that it's high and the dollar figure is going to be lasting. And will it, I don't know, will the revenue we gain from the tar sands actually make up for what we're going to end up having to pay in healthcare? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be good. So you get short-term profit, but you get long-term effects. And that also comes with a decrease in clean water. You use 6 barrels of water for every 1 barrel of oil gained. And clean water is one of those things that you cannot replace. Canada has a lot of it at this time, but clean water is a finite resource once you pollute it. And if you pollute it really well, it's really hard to get back and sometimes impossible. And the tar sands is not at all good for water. And at this point, most of the dirty water is ending up in northern Alberta that is not particularly usable at this time, but it's becoming more with the global change. And also, most of the world doesn't have huge areas of forests. They think we're crazy for polluting what is, on a world scale, huge thing for the world. There's just not a lot of forests left, and Canada has the luxury of being able to ignore it, but the rest of the world does not, and I think we're crazy to ignore that, which looks, again, the environmental health, nature, wildlife. You saw the fish. I don't know the direct impact to the plants and stuff, but it can't be good. I mean, obviously, in the global warming, there's impacts, the heavy metal, there's impacts. Basically, all the wildlife in the immediate surrounding is negatively impacted, and eventually there will have to be cleanups, and there will be a cost involved in that. There's a decrease in agricultural land. At this point, it is not agricultural land, but with global warming and in the future, I think there's a good chance that this is land that actually eventually could be used for that. And it is being used by natives and stuff for hunting. So it is, I suppose, not agricultural land, but it is land that people use for their food that is now being polluted and is no longer usable. And there's a major decrease in community up north, so the native bands really dislike it. There's much higher cancer rates and big problems with the community. They tend not to be the ones who are getting the jobs. Most of the people who are working the tar sands are people from out of province or out of city, and again, a lot of them, there's a huge disproportion, so you get a lot of males, you get a lot of money, and not a lot of people do. So you do see high drugs, high prostitution. In general, they're not very positive places to change that equation, I mean, you need to have an equilibrium. If you don't have an equilibrium to the amount of people, to how much you use a day, to how much there is, you're going to run out. And running out of stuff is bad economy, even if you're, even if you don't like economy, you have to realize, I don't know where I'm going with that, sorry. Where did I go? Oh. So I'm almost done. What I really want to do is have you guys talk about it. My two solutions are that the government actually has to start enforcing this stuff. That if we don't look at economy, society, and environment as being all three tied, you're going to have problems. So I mean, if you look at the bombing of Hiroshima, economically, it's fantastic. We won the war, it didn't take a lot of people, money-wise it was great. But if you look at society, it's a disaster. If you look at environment, it's a disaster. So if you're looking at the equation, you're only looking at economy, you're going to lose. You can't win. Until we set up our society and have it so that we look at all three. So we have the economy, the society, and I think in the past we haven't looked at environment, but until we have all three of those in the equation, we're not going to get anywhere. That's what I wanted to say, but what I wanted you guys to do is discuss, because I'm pretty sure in this room we have huge heads with lots of ideas, and I'd like to see where we go. So I just wanted to actually have more time to discuss. Does anyone have any thoughts or ideas?
Do you give presentations? Do you what audience do you usually? It's a great presentation. And it covers a lot of really good issues, and it hits at a level where you can really understand where the popular audience out there, I think, could get a grasp of this information. Are you out there doing presentations?
Usually not, no.
Yeah.
And I totally forgot, this is the economy based on action renewable resources. Totally forgot I had two sides. This one you can stand on and throw at people, this one is just going to combust.
Have you spent a lot of time up in the tar sands area?
Sadly, I have not. I've traveled south, but not north. I know people who have. Seen stuff, but not.
So how does this affect your art?
How does this affect my art? Oh, that's a difficult question.
Or maybe I'll put it a different way. Do you use your art to forward this message?
Not specifically, but yes, I do. I don't tend to do literal art, I tend to do more abstract. So the themes of, I guess more the themes of finite and I guess apocalyptic. The world like things going to a problem show up in my art, but the specific tar sands, no. But the idea that where we're leading is impending doom is definitely in my artwork.
You said that the Hiroshima bomb benefited the economy. I was just wondering how did that bomb benefit the economy?
As in the rest of the war, like if we hadn't done the bomb and we continued on the war is really expensive.
It benefits the economy usually. War is usually a benefit to the economy.
Creating jobs, employing people, soldiers,
Industries. Perhaps I'm wrong there.
Well, what about this idea of apocalypse? I mean, we've had a number of presentations and they've been great, but you don't quite get the sense of the personal angst. I was just listening to, I think it's Clive Hamilton, the Australian guy, last night. Somebody said I should read his latest book, so I didn't have the book. I thought I'd trying to lecture on it. And he gives a really, really good methodical presentation of the facts. puts things in perspective. It puts all of what we're doing here in a kind of surreal perspective, right? Just talking about the facts without really talking about what it means to us. How does, from my academics, it affects me because I'm sort of continually having to, when I sit down and write something, I think, this is irrelevant, man. Like, come on, I gotta get closer to what the real issue is here, because look at what's going on. Did you find that? I mean, and scientists, you're closer to that than most of us, right? Because you see the implications just in the projections from you know, the kind of work that you do as a scientist. How do people feel about things from that perspective? Well, maybe we can start with you. Why did you bring up the issue of apocalypse? How does that affect your art?
I bring up the idea of apocalypse because in some way I kind of see that's where the world is headed. I don't know what 6 degrees or 4 degrees of climate change will happen, but I don't know, I see tsunamis in Japan, I see the possibility of epidemics, I see the water possibly rising really high, I see huge possible changes. So the way we're living in destroying, like, we're using so many resources and they're not replaceable. The way we're headed is we're headed to our own destruction. So, and I think the tar sands is a big one. The reason Canada can't make the Kyoto Accord is simply the tar sands. There's very little else. If you travel in North America, Canada has way better transit systems than any of the cities in the States. Is it a big thing? No, but if you can use a car instead of, you know, if you can use the bus instead of a car, if you can change the way you sort of react to your environment, your chances of survival is better. But if we have things like the tar sand, which it's only one thing, and yes, it's massive, but this one thing is the reason that there's no possible way we can make the Kyoto Accord, and we just go ahead and do it. Even though a lot of us kind of think it's a bad idea, we just feel like this is what's going to happen. If we keep on making these choices and we keep on seeing government making these choices, where we're headed is not a good place. And I see that being apocalyptic.
But if you run out of energy, it's also disastrous.
Do you know how much energy you get out of the tar sands compared to how much goes in?
Well, you're still on the positive side. Not much, but you are.
It's slightly better than ethanol, but very little. The actual energy you get out of it is really, I think it's 1 joule goes in and 1.4 goes in, if I recall from past presentations. You are on the positive by not by a lot. I think that positive you could gain much quicker by being more efficient than you do out of the tar sands. Maybe in 40 years, if they increase the amount of energy you could get out and increase the way or decrease the negative impacts, maybe the tar sands will be worthwhile. But today, I just don't see it's feasible. I mean, economically, yes, it's good, but it's good only in the short term. If you look in the long term, there's a lot of real problems with the project, and what you get out of it is really minute.
But we are totally dependent on energy. Just think of what would happen if we ran out. It's the population we should be curbing.
Shouldn't we then be working on energy sources that are actually renewable?
Yes, we should, but we're bridging the gap, I hope.
Do we need to bridge it right now?
Well, economically, yes, because the governments keep wanting more money.
And they can't get more money by investing it in renewable energy?
No, they wouldn't get such quick returns.
Not immediately, but in 10 years, would they?
Oh, but our political system is based on short term. The life of each representative in the government is 4 years.
Therein lies the problem.
Therein lies the problem.
I think Jim Hansen, sorry.
Oh, well, if you're going to respond to
Yeah,
that.
quick point response. Jim Hansen, when there was a slow down the economy because of the events of 2007, 2008. Aggregate CO2 emissions went down, and because of basically a small but a bit of a collapse of the economy, he said, this is what we need. I mean, coming out of that, looking at all the numbers, what is required right now to avert disastrous climate change? It's coming closer and closer. We need to collapse the economy. So it's a question between all of the dangers inherent and all the vulnerabilities we face personally as a society as the economy collapses, or burning up the planet.
But you have to convince the ordinary people to give up. And how much are you willing to give up? You know, nobody seems to be willing to give up anything.
It's true, but I do think you can regulate stuff. I mean, the fact that most computer stuff and a lot of stuff is actually designed now to break. I mean, that's ridiculous that my computer has a finite, like, it's not supposed to live past 4 or 5 years. I can't upgrade it. I mean, it should be illegal to create stuff that breaks, and all of us here would benefit from not having to rebuy stuff.
But we're
We
a
benefit from
consumer
free.
society. Our economy is based on consumption. So you can't really say that unless you change people's way of living.
Perhaps it's true, but our way of living has changed to be this way. When you were young, was it that way?
No, of course not.
And was it thriving?
Well, I could go back to it, but how could other people?
Now what I have to say is more relevant, actually. Because I'm in geography, and I teach about the relationship between nature and society. In fact, I teach a course called Society and Environment. And part of what I'm trying to do is to raise these issues with students in a variety, using a variety of theoretical perspectives. But for you as an artist, one of the most effective ways that I do it is through showing the film Manufactured Landscapes. Have you seen that movie?
Yes.
Because Brzezinski is an artist.
Yeah.
He takes amazing, these huge scale photographs of manufactured sites or the results of art. And I show it actually also in a course I teach on China. I show it in all my courses because he's documenting his trip to China where he's taking photographs of industrial sites and factories and then the results of economic growth and sort of the building of things and then the taking apart of things and what happens to all this junk that's left over. But what my students take away from that is how much we're all implicated in that. It isn't just China out there, it's all of us. And then my students really do talk about, well, the issue of how do we change our patterns of consumption. It's not changing the world, but at least it is kind of a step, it's moving forward in some way.
When you look to overseas, it's really bizarre that Western countries are allowed to go into third and second world countries and prove it the way that is illegal in their home countries. Like, these are strange things that should be illegal because obviously the goods are all being shipped back to countries where they have better laws for pollution, where they have better laws for control, and most of the companies are owned by countries that are wealthy. And it is bizarre that we allow them to go and pollute in another place because pollution doesn't stay where it's created. And I mean, the globe is one big world, and the fact that in Canada we can afford to have not great laws for pollution, but moderate laws, but Canadian companies can then go to Honduras and they can go to India and they don't have those laws and don't have to abide by them, but they are a Canadian company. They make money in Canada. They sell the products to Canadians. And the fact that they can just bypass environmental laws is crazy because the environment in Honduras and in India actually affects our environment. What they put into the air there comes back to here. It's one big world.
Not very long ago, I read an article that was talking about the gas underneath in Alberta. And they were saying that there is as much gas, natural gas, under Alberta as it is oil in Saudi Arabia. And yet nobody is really touching this, and that is a much cleaner burning fuel.
Yes.
And I think that perhaps these things are political.
I think they're political, and I think there's obviously some amount of personal gain for the political leaders. Because, I mean, the tar sands are not, in the broad spectrum of Canadians, they're really not that popular. Why do they proceed? Because there's that immediate amount, and obviously there must be some personal gain for the people who proceed, or they wouldn't.
But they didn't touch that until the oil went over $60 because it didn't pay for it. So I don't know. I cannot see any other reason why not touching the natural gas, except that being a political decision.
It's also not cost effective. The price of natural gas is very low right now,
Yeah,
right?
but
And the cost of extraction and transport is not going to be recovered, especially
Yeah,
the price will dip lower if the supply increases. And
But if we would use that instead of the oil, obviously the price would go up.
Yeah.
no, there'd be more, well, it depends, right? It depends on the relationship between supply and demand.
Yeah, but if the reason you're saying you need the tar sands is that you need the energy, you're right. The gas would be way better, but the point is that the reason they do the tar sands is for the economic reasons, but I think the economic reasons are really short-term for the tar sands. You disagree?
Well, I have two separate points. The tar sands investment seems to be a long-term economic investment. The cost of harvesting the petroleum from the tar sands is quite expensive, and it's only worth doing if the long-term prospects are going to be sufficient, are good prospects. So right now, the tar sands don't make a lot of money, but I take it that the idea behind beginning the exploitation of that resource is that the drilled oil we're at peak oil, so that's going to run out, and that's going to create a real demand for the resource that's harvested. And there's a reason why companies are investing lots of their resources to do that. And so I don't know that your way of putting things as a long-term gain versus short-term gain is the right balance to strike. There's two long-term gains that are being pitted against each other, right?
Yeah.
And, depending on whether there are different ways of thinking about what's more valuable in the long term, rather than a long-term versus short-term balance, right? And I guess that sort of brings me to the second thing that I just wanted to mention. It seems that one of the big concerns is around how to motivate change, right? How to motivate people to think about their short-term interests and their long-term interests, and to change behavior. But I guess I worry about the kind of apocalyptic vision and language, because personally, if the end of the world is coming, I have no motivation to do very much, right? Because there's little that I can do to change the inevitability of the apocalypse. It's much more motivating if you think that actions that you take can actually maybe make a little bit of a difference, right?